Hi, my name is Egan Barzilay, and I'm here with the Community Intern Project at LTV. Today I'm here with my guest, Julia McCarthy. She is a Senior Program Officer at the New York State Health Foundation. Julia, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to start by asking you how your work is looking with the New York Health Foundation, especially with your recent survey.
Sure. So, the New York Health Foundation is an independent nonprofit that gives grants to groups across the state that are working to improve New Yorkers' health. And we have a focus on food, as you know, we have several focus areas. And specifically, we fund projects that seek to reduce hunger and reduce dietary disease. And, oftentimes these problems, hunger and dietary disease, are seen as wicked problems, right? There's convoluted causes and really complex solutions. And we know that that's actually just not true. So we did a survey of 1,500 New Yorkers this time last year, and we found that, the causes and the solutions are simple: more money and more time. So I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. Talk about sort of what food insecurity means more generally.
Yeah, so would you mind giving a brief rundown on what food insecurity is and how it's really correlated with health?
Sure. So food insecurity is defined by the United States Department of Agriculture as worry about whether you'll be able to put food on the table, and essentially it's hunger. Those terms are often used interchangeably, and food insecurity and health are inextricably linked. So, you know, there's obvious that if you're worried about whether you're going to have food, you have more stress and more anxieties in your life, but there's also a physical toll, right? So we know that New Yorkers who are food insecure are actually 9 times more likely to have poor health, or say they have poor health, than food secure New Yorkers. We know that 22% of New Yorkers who are food insecure are actually skipping or delaying getting medical care, and 13% are skipping or delaying filling prescription medication. And, when we talk about health outcomes, we know that these are worse for rural New Yorkers. We know that they're worse for Black and brown New Yorkers, and that these rates are especially the highest for Hispanic New Yorkers. And, you may be thinking, well, this sounds like an individual problem, but it's not. It's a societal problem. So actually, it costs the state over $3 billion dollars a year, and that rounds out to about $173 per person, just the cost of food insecurity alone.
So, what are the SNAP and WSC programs, and why are the programs not as effective as they're intended to be?
So I want to start by saying that SNAP and WIC, so the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program and the Women, Infants, and Children's Program, are federal food benefits that people get that enable them to purchase food at a grocery store. And they are phenomenal programs. So research has shown time and time again, they reduce poverty, especially childhood poverty, and they reduce hunger. The problem with those programs, in New York at least, typically centers around two things. One, enrollment, and two, eligibility. So, for example, only 59% of people who are eligible for WIC, or the Women, Infants, and Children's Program, actually participate, right? And so that means 41% do not take advantage of a program that could make their lives a lot easier. And you might ask, well, why don't they just enroll? And there are many reasons. Sometimes they don't know about the program. Sometimes taking time off work, spending time at the office, finding the documents can be very difficult. But another reason around that, more people don't participate is that anti-immigration policies from the former federal administration actually have a hangover effect. And so even though undocumented families can participate in WIC, many of them choose not to because they're scared that it will affect their future immigration status. And so that, in a state where we have a huge population of undocumented people, it means that many people are going hungry who shouldn't be as a result. And then the second problem is one of eligibility. So even the federal food programs with the loosest benefit requirements only allow people to participate if you make up to 185% of the federal poverty guidelines. And just give you some real numbers. That means that a family of four that makes over $52,000 a year can't take advantage of these. And, when you think about $52,000 in New York State, that doesn't go far when it's your rent or your mortgage, your gas, your rising grocery bill, and childcare. So, you know, these programs, while very effective, are just out of reach for some. And, you know, the federal government needs to step up, frankly, and re-examine the cost of living in especially places like New York. But the state can also be stepping in to make sure that people aren't going hungry.
Do you believe that there are any other policies that should or could be implemented to increase their effectiveness?
Sure. So, I mean, currently there are advocates across the state calling for lawmakers to extend universal school meals. So during COVID, every public school across the country could provide meals to every single student free of charge. And we know from research that, you know, this reduces, you know, it raises test scores, it reduces stigma, it increases attendance, and it drives down the cost of providing the actual meals. And yet when that policy ended in September, and many states like California and Maine have stepped up and said, we'll pay for it. And New York has not yet. And so, you know, universal school meals is one way that New York State could actually help fill a gap and make people's lives much easier.
And so down the line, what do you really see as being the long-term effects of food insecurity?
I mean, there are many long-term effects. I think that, you know, important ones that we should talk about are just the tough trade-offs that people have to take. So we talked a little bit earlier about, you know, how food insecurity affects people's ability to treat health conditions, but it actually, you know, there are steps that having secure access to food can prevent illness. And so people taking tough trade-offs often will, you know, skip meals, or they'll buy processed or packaged goods. And, you know, these are goods that are higher in sodium, in salt, in saturated fat. You know, they're not the kind of meals that your doctor or your dietitian would be recommending that you eat, right? And, you know, there are many reasons why people do that. You know, one is that those products are heavily marketed. They're often on sale on purpose. And, you know, those products are also lighter, so you can carry them on a bus by foot, which we know many New Yorkers are doing to get groceries. And they last longer on your shelf. So if you don't know you have, you know, reliable access to a car, which about half of New Yorkers do not have, you know that you can buy, you know, once a month, and then it'll sit on your shelf and still be able to be eaten.
And what would you recommend to our community specifically to bolster action to reduce food insecurity?
Well, I'd say there's two things. First, in Long Island, the stigma around participating in these programs is much higher. And so looking at SNAP, for instance, you know, food insecurity in Long Island looks very similar to food insecurity across New York State, and that's to say it's devastating. But in Long Island specifically, rates of participation in SNAP are much lower. So we have across the state, typically 1 in 5 people don't participate in any school meal program, SNAP, WIC, or go to a food pantry. In Long Island, it's more than 1 in 3. So just fewer people take advantage of the programs that are designed to help them out. And we think that's partially because of stigma. And we also think that's partially because there's lower satisfaction with those programs. And we saw that in our survey data. So people are, you know, maybe in suburban areas, there's fewer resources, fewer social services available. And in a place, you know, where you have great inequality, you often have supermarkets that are, you know, catering to a very specific kind of clientele. And so they may not accept SNAP, they may not accept WIC, and they also, their prices just may be so high that it's practically, you know, impossible to shop there, even if you have those benefits. So I think, you know, talking about the importance of these programs is really important. And then a very concrete action you can take, because you're a high schooler and, you know, you participate, like your school participates in school meals, is to use your voice to talk about how important this is. So when you think of the people walking around your hallways, you know, if their family makes more than $52,000 a year, but not much more, you know, the difference in participating in those school meals can be the difference between going hungry and getting good grades, right? And so normalizing eating school meals is really important, creating a culture in your school where I'd like to say it's cool to eat school meals, but even if it's not cool to eat school meals, it's at least you're not making fun of people for doing that. And finally, I'd say that there are advocates across the state, calling on lawmakers to take action. And there's advocacy days to educate people about why that's so important. And student voice is needed, whether that's in the media or, going to Albany and telling people, why it's important for you and for your classmates.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
It was really great having you on.
Thanks.